In the world of country music, Nashville has always been painted as a place of brotherhood, loyalty, and unshakable friendships. But behind the bright lights and heartfelt lyrics, some of the genre's biggest legends weren't nearly as loyal as fans believed. From whispered betrayals to shocking career moves, these stories reveal how ambition and jealousy turned friends into rivals. Today, we uncover Muhav country legends who secretly backstabbed their friends in Nashville. Tone: sharp, documentary style, suspenseful. Dung vai format si so 01 pandan hedong. Hank Williams Sr. Hank Williams Sr. is remembered today as the tortured genius who gave country music some of its most timeless classics. Songs like I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry and Your Cheatin' Heart cemented his legacy as a legend. But behind the myth of the lonely troubadour was a man whose reckless choices slowly destroyed the friendships that once held him up. In the late 1940s, Hank was the rising star of Nashville's honky-tonk scene. Fellow musicians admired his raw voice and admired his ability to turn heartbreak into poetry. Many saw him as a friend, someone who shared the struggles of the road and the hunger for recognition. But as his fame skyrocketed, so did his dependence on alcohol and morphine. Suddenly, the friend who once leaned on his circle began letting them down, again and again. Band members complained that Hank would skip rehearsals, stumble into shows drunk, or fail to show up altogether, leaving colleagues humiliated in front of paying crowds. Promises made over a handshake in a Nashville bar often dissolved the moment he found a better opportunity. To his friends, it felt less like the tragic spiral of a sick man and more like betrayal. They had trusted him with their careers, their reputations, and sometimes their financial stability. In return, Hank gave them chaos. One of the most notorious examples was his relationship with the Drifting Cowboys, the band that helped launch his career. At first, they were a tight unit, struggling together for a place on the Opry stage. But as Hank's drinking worsened, he began firing members abruptly, replacing them when they complained about his unreliability. For the Cowboys, it was the ultimate backstab. The man they helped build into a star turned his back when they needed stability the most. Even Hank's personal friendships collapsed under the weight of his demons. Fellow singers who once admired him began avoiding him, fearful that association with his behavior would ruin their own chances in Nashville. In a city where loyalty was currency, Hank was seen as cashing out on everyone who stood beside him. By the time of his death in 1953, at just 29 years old, Hank Williams was both revered and resented. He had changed country music forever, but he had also left a trail of broken trust. His story reminds us that in Nashville, brilliance doesn't excuse betrayal. And even legends can backstab the very friends who once lifted them up. Lefty Frizzell. Lefty Frizzell was one of the first true country superstars, a man whose smooth, slurred singing style shaped generations of artists from Willie Nelson to Merle Haggard. On stage, he looked like the friendly honky-tonk crooner who could charm any crowd. But behind the scenes, Lefty was plagued by envy, resentment, and a habit of turning on the very friends who once supported him. In the early 1950s, Lefty was often mentioned in the same breath as Hank Williams Sr. The two were seen as kindred spirits, rough-edged Southern boys who brought honesty and grit to country music. For a time, they bonded over long nights on the road and a shared love for whiskey-fueled storytelling. Fans believed they were brothers in arms, carrying the torch of honky-tonk together. But Nashville insiders remember it differently. The friendship between Hank and Lefty quickly soured when Lefty realized he would never match Hank's stardom. Instead of celebrating his friend's success, Lefty began to stew in jealousy. Rumors spread that he mocked Hank behind closed doors, dismissing his songwriting as simple-minded and accusing him of stealing his style. The whispers didn't stop there. Lefty also clashed with other rising artists, spreading gossip, sabotaging deals, and maneuvering himself into headlining slots at the expense of his supposed friends. One infamous example came during a Grand Ole Opry run, where Lefty reportedly tried to undercut Hank by persuading promoters that Hank's drinking made him unreliable. Though the accusations weren't entirely untrue, Nashville's unwritten code frowned upon betrayal. To expose a friend's weaknesses publicly was to cross a line. For many, Lefty had crossed it without hesitation. This pattern continued throughout his career. Band members recalled that Lefty could be generous one day and cruelly dismissive the next, cutting them out of opportunities or taking credit for arrangements he didn't create. Fellow singers who once admired him began to keep their distance, wary of his unpredictability and sharp tongue. In a town built on camaraderie, Lefty became notorious for burning bridges as fast as he built them. Ironically, while Lefty tried to backstab his way into Hank's spotlight, it was Hank who remained the legend after death, while Lefty's career began to fade. By the 1960s, he was largely forgotten, overshadowed by the very friends he once tried to undermine. When he died in 1975 at just 47 years old, he was remembered as a pioneer, but also as a man whose envy had cost him lasting friendships in Nashville. In the end, Lefty Frizzell's story stands as a cautionary tale. In country music, talent can take you far, but jealousy and betrayal can leave you isolated. His voice shaped the genre forever, but his backstabbing left scars that Nashville never forgot. Patsy Cline. Patsy Cline is celebrated as one of the most beloved voices in country music history. With hits like Crazy and I Fall to Pieces, she became the first female country star to truly break into mainstream America. To the public, she was a symbol of grace and generosity, often described as a mentor who paved the way for other women in the industry. But in Nashville, the story wasn't always so clean. Behind the applause, Patsy's ambition sometimes collided with her friendships, leaving behind whispers of betrayal. In the late 1950s, Patsy formed close bonds with other female country singers, including Kitty Wells and Loretta Lynn. On the surface, they were allies, women standing together in a male-dominated industry. But the fight for recognition was fierce. Kitty Wells had long been hailed as the queen of country music, and when Patsy's star began to rise, tension surfaced. Industry insiders claimed Patsy grew frustrated with constantly being compared to Kitty and felt she deserved to replace her as the leading lady of the Opry. This rivalry wasn't openly broadcast, but stories circulated that Patsy would privately dismiss Kitty's influence, positioning herself as the modern voice of country while portraying Kitty as outdated. To some in Nashville, this was a subtle form of backstabbing, using charm and connections to push a colleague into the shadows. Even with Loretta Lynn, often described as her little sister, Patsy's mentorship carried a sharp edge. Loretta adored her, crediting her with life-changing advice. But industry gossip suggested Patsy was wary of Loretta's potential to outshine her. Some even claimed Patsy occasionally borrowed material or musical ideas before Loretta could fully develop them, ensuring she stayed ahead in the race. Whether true or not, these rumors stained what outsiders saw as an unbreakable friendship. Patsy also had a reputation for being blunt and brutally honest. While fans admired her toughness, colleagues sometimes saw it as arrogance. She would openly criticize fellow performers, telling them they didn't have what it took to survive in Nashville. For friends expecting loyalty, these public put-downs felt like betrayal. Tragically, Patsy's life was cut short in a plane crash in 1963 at only 30 years old. In death, she was immortalized as a trailblazer and pioneer for women in country music. But those who knew her in Nashville remembered a more complicated truth, a woman whose drive for greatness sometimes meant stepping on friends along the way. Patsy Cline remains a legend, her voice unmatched and her songs timeless. Yet her story reminds us that even in a world built on ballads about love and loyalty, ambition can twist friendships into rivalries, and Nashville never forgets those scars. Loretta Lynn. Loretta Lynn, the coal miner's daughter, was hailed as the voice of working-class women, a trailblazer who brought raw honesty to country music. With songs like Don't Come Home A-Drinkin' and You Ain't Woman Enough, she carved out a space for female empowerment in a genre dominated by men. To her fans, she was the picture of loyalty and sisterhood, especially in her famous friendship with Patsy Cline. But in the backstage halls of Nashville, the whispers told a more complicated story, one where friendship and ambition often collided. Loretta and Patsy shared a bond that felt unshakable. Patsy mentored Loretta, guided her stage presence, and even dressed her in clothes that matched the glitz of the Opry. Loretta openly credited Patsy with saving her career. Yet, after Patsy's tragic death in 1963, some insiders claimed Loretta's career trajectory benefited from the void Patsy left behind. Critics suggested that Loretta leaned on her connection to Patsy to claim a higher position in the Nashville hierarchy, portraying herself as Patsy's natural successor. To some, that looked like a subtle backstab, capitalizing on a sister's death to step into her spotlight. But Patsy wasn't the only colleague Loretta clashed with. As her fame grew, rivalries with other female stars became inevitable. Whispered stories suggested that Loretta could be fiercely competitive, cutting others out of opportunities to secure her dominance. She was known to fight for stage time, radio play, and media attention, and some of her so-called friends felt steamrolled by her determination. One rival even accused Loretta of deliberately spreading gossip to undermine her credibility in Nashville. Even in her songwriting, Loretta didn't hesitate to step on toes. She took real-life issues from her community, sometimes even personal stories from those close to her, and turned them into hit records. While fans saw this as authenticity, some insiders considered it betrayal, accusing her of exploiting private struggles for commercial gain. Yet the most telling sign of Loretta's backstabbing reputation came from her iron grip on her image. She carefully crafted the persona of a humble coal miner's daughter while working behind the scenes to secure business deals that left her peers out in the cold. Nashville was built on the idea of loyalty among peers, but Loretta was often accused of putting herself first. By the time of her passing in 2022, Loretta Lynn was universally celebrated as an icon. Still, in Nashville's memory, her rise was not without bruised friendships and broken trust. She may have sung about loyalty and sisterhood, but her career proved that in the cutthroat world of country music, even the coal miner's daughter knew how to backstab when it served her. Tammy Wynette. Tammy Wynette, forever remembered as the first lady of country music, built her career on heartbreaking ballads of love and loyalty. Her anthem Stand By Your Man became one of the most iconic and controversial songs in country history. To her audience, Tammy was the voice of devotion, a woman who embodied traditional values and the sacrifices of love. But behind the rhinestones and the radio hits, her climb through Nashville was marked by whispers of betrayal, calculated moves, and friendships left shattered. In the late 1960s, Tammy arrived in Nashville with little more than determination. She quickly formed bonds with other women chasing the same dream, sharing stages and hotel rooms, often lifting each other up in an unforgiving industry. To those early friends, Tammy seemed like one of them, a loyal companion in the struggle. But as her career accelerated, those friendships began to fracture. Industry insiders claimed Tammy had a sharp instinct for survival, and she often sided with powerful producers and executives, even if it meant undercutting her peers. Some accused her of using her alliances with men in power to push other women out of the way, ensuring she had first pick of songs and prime performance slots. What looked like ambition to her fans sometimes felt like betrayal to her friends, who suddenly found doors closing after Tammy walked through them. Her tumultuous relationship with George Jones only added fuel to the fire. Together, they were country's royal couple, but behind the scenes, their on-again, off-again drama created collateral damage for those around them. Musicians, managers, and even close friends found themselves forced to pick sides. Many later said Tammy turned loyalty into a weapon, using friendships when convenient, and discarding them when they no longer served her career or personal battles. Even within her female circle, tensions brewed. Tammy's rise was so meteoric that it overshadowed other women in country, and rumors spread that she deliberately distanced herself from competitors once she reached the top. Some Nashville veterans recall bitter stories of singers who felt Tammy had smiled to their faces while maneuvering behind the scenes to block their opportunities. By the 1970s, Tammy Wynette was an untouchable icon, her voice echoing through every corner of America. Yet her reputation in Nashville was more complicated. For every fan who admired her, there was a colleague who remembered the sting of her ambition. When she died in 1998, the tributes poured in, but so did the quiet acknowledgement that Tammy had not always stood by her friends. Her story reminds us that in Nashville, loyalty often comes second to survival. Tammy Wynette sang of devotion, but in the brutal climb to the top, even the First Lady of Country knew how to turn her back when it mattered most. George Jones, the Possum, is remembered as one of the greatest voices in country music history, His ability to deliver raw emotion in songs like He Stopped Loving Her Today made him a legend. But while his music told stories of heartbreak and devotion, his personal life in Nashville was defined by chaos, shifting loyalties, and betrayals that left many of his friends disillusioned. For all his genius, George Jones was a man whose demons often turned him against those closest to him. Early in his career, George formed tight bonds with fellow musicians. He was charming, funny, and magnetic, the kind of friend who would buy a round of drinks and make the whole room laugh. But that same charm could quickly sour. His drinking, combined with his unpredictable temper, left his colleagues feeling like they never knew which George they were going to get. Friends who trusted him often found themselves abandoned when he chased bigger opportunities or chose a bottle over a commitment. One of the most infamous examples of betrayal came during his marriage and professional partnership with Tammy Wynette. Their duets made them a powerhouse couple. But behind the scenes, George's constant disappearances and unreliability devastated not just Tammy, but their bandmates and friends. He would promise to show up for rehearsals or tours, only to vanish for days or even weeks on drinking binges. Colleagues who counted on him to honor contracts were left scrambling, reputations tarnished because of George's absence. To many, it felt like the ultimate backstab. He not only betrayed Tammy, but dragged down anyone tied to their act. Beyond Tammy, George's career was riddled with broken alliances. He would switch producers, managers, and even band members abruptly, often without warning or explanation. Some accused him of trading loyalty for the chance at a bigger paycheck or more favorable deal, leaving old friends behind with bitterness. Nashville was built on trust, but with George, trust was a dangerous gamble. Perhaps the cruelest part was that George often won forgiveness. His unmatched voice and ability to channel pure pain into music kept him adored by fans and welcomed back by peers he had wronged. But scars remained. Many who worked with him swore they would never put themselves in that position again, relying on a man who seemed destined to let them down. By the time of his death in 2013, George Jones had cemented himself as an icon, but the stories of betrayal still echoed through Nashville. He was proof that brilliance doesn't erase broken trust. George Jones sang about heartbreak better than anyone, but behind the microphone, he often delivered heartbreak to his friends. Conway Twitty. Conway Twitty, often called the high priest of country music, was one of the most successful crossover artists in the history of the genre. With a staggering 55 #1 hits and a smooth, seductive voice, he dominated country charts through the 1970s and 1980s. Fans saw him as the charming crooner who could make any love song unforgettable. But in Nashville, the legend carried another reputation. One of a man who wasn't afraid to step on friends and colleagues to keep himself at the top. Conway's career began in rock and roll before he shifted into country, a move that initially drew skepticism from traditionalists. To gain a foothold, he relied heavily on connections with established artists who opened doors for him. Yet insiders claimed that once Conway secured his spot, he had little interest in returning the favor. Instead, he earned a reputation for outshining and even undermining those who helped him along the way. Touring stories are especially telling. Conway was known for taking the headlining slot and then stretching his set far beyond the agreed-upon time, cutting into the performances of his supposed friends. Opening acts complained that they were left with only a fraction of the crowd's attention, some nights barely performing at all. While Conway entertained the audience, fellow musicians backstage saw it as blatant sabotage, a way to ensure no one else could steal his spotlight. His collaborations also weren't free from betrayal. While his famous duets with Loretta Lynn created timeless classics, their partnership was marked by rumors of control and tension. Some Nashville insiders suggested that Conway tried to dominate the narrative, ensuring he received more credit and visibility than his female counterpart. Loretta herself would later hint at power struggles, admitting that not everything was as harmonious as it seemed on stage. Even in business dealings, Conway's ambitions sometimes left former friends behind. He invested in clubs and music ventures, but was notorious for abruptly pulling out of partnerships or renegotiating deals when it suited him, often leaving collaborators financially stranded. To many in Nashville, it was a pattern. Conway smiled in public, but behind the curtain, he was willing to cut ties if it meant protecting his empire. By the time of his death in 1993, Conway Twitty was a legend, honored for his contributions to country music. Yet among those who worked with him, the memories were mixed. Some admired his brilliance, while others quietly remembered the nights when he backstabbed friends to keep himself on top. His story proves that in Nashville, charm and betrayal can live side by side, and Conway Twitty mastered both. Dolly Parton, the glittering icon of country music, is celebrated worldwide as a symbol of kindness, generosity, and pure talent. With her unmistakable voice in songs like Jolene and I Will Always Love You, she transcended Nashville to become a global superstar. To fans, Dolly has always been the embodiment of loyalty and humility. But within Nashville's closed circles, her decision to strike out on her own, and the way she did it, has long been remembered as one of the most dramatic backstabs in country history. In the mid-1960s, Dolly was still an unknown talent when Porter Wagoner brought her onto The Porter Wagoner Show. He championed her, showcased her, and even molded her public image. Their partnership blossomed into one of the most successful duos on the Opry stage. To Porter, Dolly was not just a protege, but almost family, someone he believed would stand by him as they climbed together. But Dolly had ambitions that went far beyond being a sidekick. By the early 1970s, she wanted a solo career. When she told Porter she was leaving, he saw it as the ultimate betrayal. Their professional split became one of Nashville's most notorious feuds. Porter accused her of disloyalty, claiming he had sacrificed years building her up, only to be stabbed in the back. He even sued her for breach of contract, dragging their private conflict into public view. For Nashville insiders, it was a clear case of a rising star cutting ties with the very man who had made her famous. To make matters worse, Dolly poured her complicated feelings into a song, I Will Always Love You. On the surface, it was a farewell ballad, but to Porter, it was salt in the wound. The song became a massive hit, proof that Dolly's solo instincts had been right. While audiences adored it, Porter felt humiliated, left behind by the very woman he had championed. Even as Dolly built a reputation for generosity, giving to charities, supporting fellow artists, and building Dollywood, that early move left a mark. Some Nashville veterans still whispered that she had proven how ruthless she could be when it came to survival. She never denied her ambition, once famously saying, "You can't be a star and a saint too." Today, Dolly Parton's legacy shines brighter than ever, but the story of her split from Porter Wagoner remains a reminder. In Nashville, even the sweetest voices sometimes rise by breaking hearts. To her fans, she's the fairy godmother of country. To Porter, she was the friend who walked away and never looked back. Reba McEntire. Reba McEntire is often hailed as the Queen of Country, a title she earned with her powerhouse vocals, fiery personality, and a career that has spanned over 4 decades. With hits like Fancy and Does He Love You, she not only dominated the charts, but also transformed herself into a multimedia star with acting, business ventures, and even her own TV show. To the public, Reba was the image of country royalty. But inside Nashville, her climb to the throne was anything but smooth, and some insiders still whisper about the friendships she sacrificed along the way. In the early years, Reba was seen as an ambitious young singer struggling to find her place among a crowded field of female stars. She leaned on friendships with other women at the Opry, often presenting herself as humble and approachable. But as her career gained traction, the rumors began. Stories circulated that Reba was quietly maneuvering behind the scenes, using industry connections to secure songs and stage slots that others believed were promised to them. In a city where loyalty was currency, this was seen as betrayal. Her rivalry with other female powerhouses only deepened the perception. When Reba emerged in the 1980s as a leading force, some colleagues accused her of pushing out competition. She was fiercely protective of her image and brand, and those who crossed her allegedly found themselves shut out of key opportunities. One story that still circulates in Nashville is how Reba outmaneuvered a close friend for a high-profile recording project, smiling to her face while securing the deal behind closed doors. The 1990s further cemented her reputation. As country exploded in popularity, Reba was everywhere. Stadium tours, award shows, TV specials. But for every accolade she earned, there were whispers about bridges burned. Some industry veterans suggested that Reba didn't hesitate to leave behind old friends and collaborators if they no longer aligned with her brand. What looked like savvy business to her fans often felt like backstabbing to those who had once trusted her. Even her 1993 plane crash tragedy, which killed several members of her band, highlighted the sharp contrast between loyalty and ambition. While fans rallied around her grief, critics noted how quickly Reba rebuilt her act and continued her dominance. To some, it reinforced the idea that she always put her career first, no matter the personal cost. By the time she solidified her crown as Queen of Country, Reba McEntire was adored by millions and admired for her resilience. Yet among Nashville insiders, her reign carried an asterisk. The memory of friendships broken, rivals sidelined, and whispers of betrayal. Her story proves that even queens don't rise to the throne without leaving scars on the kingdom they rule. Garth Brooks. Garth Brooks is the undisputed titan of modern country music. With over 150 million records sold, stadium tours that rival rock acts, and an army of loyal fans, he reshaped the genre into a global force. To the public, he was the everyman cowboy with a big smile and bigger heart. But in Nashville, Garth's meteoric rise was shadowed by stories of ruthless ambition and friendships left in the dust. For many peers, Garth wasn't just a colleague. He was a competitor who played the game harder than anyone else, even if it meant backstabbing along the way. When Garth first arrived in Nashville in the late 1980s, he leaned heavily on the support of fellow songwriters and struggling artists. He was friendly, approachable, and always present at writers' rounds, building camaraderie with others in the trenches. But as soon as his debut album exploded, those same friends claimed he became distant, even cold. Promises to record songs or share tours allegedly vanished once Garth realized he could negotiate for the best material and the biggest stages on his own. His relationship with the Nashville establishment was equally complicated. On the surface, Garth praised tradition, but behind the scenes, he made bold moves that unsettled the old guard. He bypassed industry rules, demanded unprecedented control over his shows, and was willing to strong-arm promoters to secure prime venues. Peers who once welcomed him as one of us began to feel betrayed, as though he had used Nashville's community as a stepping stone to build his empire, then turned his back on it. Stories from touring musicians and former colleagues add to the portrait. Some recalled how Garth promised opportunities to rising stars, only to replace them when bigger names came along. Others accused him of dominating joint tours, hogging the spotlight with elaborate stage productions that made his collaborators look like afterthoughts. For a man who sang so often about friendship and loyalty, these moves looked suspiciously like betrayal. Even Garth's temporary retirement in 2001 stirred controversy. He stepped away claiming family reasons, but Nashville insiders said his withdrawal left business partners and bandmates blindsided, their careers suddenly destabilized. When he returned a decade later, he reclaimed the spotlight as though he had never left, but many who once considered themselves friends had long since walked away. By the numbers, Garth Brooks is untouchable, the best-selling solo artist in U.S. history. Yet behind the records and awards, Nashville remembers the backroom deals, the broken promises, and the bruised friendships. To fans, he is the face of country music. To some of his peers, he is also the man who proved that success in Nashville often comes at the price of loyalty. Shania Twain. Shania Twain redefined country music in the 1990s. With her dazzling looks, catchy hooks, and massive crossover hits like Man, I Feel Like a Woman, and You're Still the One, she turned Nashville on its head. To millions of fans, Shania was a trailblazer, the woman who brought country into the pop mainstream and made it cool worldwide. But in Nashville's tight-knit community, her meteoric rise was often seen less as a revolution and more as a betrayal. To her peers, Shania wasn't just changing the rules of country music. She was backstabbing the very traditions that had built the genre. When Shania arrived in Nashville, she leaned on the support of songwriters, producers, and insiders to help her find her footing. But everything changed when she partnered with producer Mutt Lange. Together, they crafted a polished, pop-infused sound that skyrocketed her to superstardom. While fans adored it, Nashville purists fumed. Many fellow artists claimed Shania had abandoned her friends in the industry, chasing fame by leaving behind the gritty authenticity of country for glossy pop hits. The backlash was intense. Rumors spread that Shania refused collaborations with traditional artists who had once welcomed her, preferring instead to align with those who could further her global reach. Colleagues who thought they had a friend in her career felt discarded. One veteran singer famously said that Shania used Nashville as a launch pad, then pretended she never knew us. To many insiders, this wasn't just ambition, it was betrayal. Her dominance on the charts only deepened the rift. For years, Shania's albums outsold everyone else, dwarfing the success of her peers. Instead of celebrating her as one of their own, many artists felt she had stolen the spotlight that should have been shared. At award shows and industry events, whispers followed her that she was two-faced, smiling in public while quietly distancing herself from those who clung to Nashville's roots. Even her personal life added to the drama. When her marriage to Mutt Lange collapsed after his affair with her best friend, it seemed like betrayal was woven into Shania's story, both given and received. To some in Nashville, it was almost poetic. The queen of crossover, accused of abandoning her friends, now betrayed by her closest circle. Despite the criticism, Shania Twain's impact cannot be denied. She became the best-selling female country artist of all time and a global superstar. Yet in Nashville's memory, her legacy is complicated. She's the woman who put country music on the world stage, but also the one who, in the eyes of her peers, backstabbed the very traditions and friendships that built her. Blake Shelton is one of the most recognizable faces in modern country music. With his string of hits, his witty personality, and his long run as a coach on The Voice, he became a household name far beyond Nashville. To fans, Blake is the charming Oklahoma cowboy who made it big while keeping his down-home humor intact. But inside the country music world, Blake's rise has been dogged by controversy and whispers that he has backstabbed friends and colleagues along the way. In his early career, Blake was known for being humble, grateful, and eager to build relationships in Nashville. He relied on veteran artists and producers to help him secure radio play and establish his reputation. But as soon as his fame exploded, colleagues began to notice a shift. Friends who once stood by his side felt left behind, ignored, or worse, dismissed in public comments that painted Blake as arrogant. His role on The Voice only magnified the tension. While the show made him a mainstream celebrity, it also distanced him from the Nashville community. Blake was accused of putting Hollywood fame ahead of country loyalty. Some insiders claimed he used the show to elevate himself while mocking or belittling peers back home. His sharp tongue, once endearing, often cut too deep. There were several instances where Blake's public jokes about fellow artists were taken as insults. Friends turned into rivals overnight. The most notorious accusations of backstabbing came from his relationships. His high-profile split with Miranda Lambert left Nashville divided, with many of their mutual friends forced to take sides. Some believed Blake had not only betrayed Miranda, but also the friendships that surrounded their marriage. When he quickly moved on with pop star Gwen Stefani, critics argued that he had abandoned the Nashville circle that had built him in favor of Hollywood glitz. To traditionalists, it was the ultimate betrayal. Blake Shelton, the country boy, had turned his back on his roots. Even within his professional circle, band members and collaborators have hinted that Blake can be difficult to trust. Promises made in private sometimes failed to materialize, and a reputation for being flippant with loyalty stuck to him. While he laughed off accusations of arrogance, those who once called him a friend quietly admitted that Blake could turn on them in an instant if it meant protecting his own brand. Today, Blake Shelton remains a towering figure in country music, still selling out arenas and commanding attention on national television. Yet, in Nashville's memory, his career is marked not just by hits and charm, but by betrayal. For every fan who adores him, there's a peer who remembers the sting of his backstab.